You're listening to Himalayan Adventure by Vaile. Chapter 41.
Sitting in the driver's seat of the stolen truck, in a dark alley several blocks away from the airport, Flattop listened intently to the distant sounds of gunfire and muffled explosions. For the past 20 minutes, the quiet rhythm of the city had been shattered by the terrifying sounds of destruction and mayhem coming from the direction of the airport. The local men, alarmed by what sounded like a full-blown war occurring in their neighborhood, had timidly ventured onto the street, gathering in small groups on the pavement to discuss the situation. Whenever the women or children emerged from nearby dwellings, they were sternly shooed back inside and told to lock the doors. With so many people on the street, Flattop had taken the precaution of covering Abby and Isabelle with an old blanket he'd found stashed behind the truck seats. Occasionally, the girls' feet stuck out of the end, and when that happened, he gave them a hard jab in the ankle with one finger, which immediately caused the offending foot to disappear back under the lumpy blanket. After a while, Flattop noticed that the gunshots became more sporadic and there were long periods of silence. It was clear that the battle had entered a new phase. One side had, or was about to, vanquish the other. As his North Korean compatriots were better armed, better trained, and had attacked the civilian airport with the element of surprise, Flattop had no doubt that it was they who had triumphed over the airport security forces and not the other way round. It therefore stood to reason that they were presently mopping up the remainder of the resistance and securing the terminal in readiness for his triumphant entrance. The giant GX sat back in his seat with a satisfied grin on his face. He could see it all. His superiors had doubted his ability to pull off this mission, but he would succeed with flying colors. Not only would he bring a yeti tooth to his masters, he would deliver a living specimen in the prime of its life. The damn thing could even talk, not that anybody wanted to listen to it for more than a few minutes. Moreover, he would be able to provide them with information about the yeti's secret city, including the most important piece of information, its location. His performance would surpass his master's expectations, and he imagined, in vivid technicolor, the extravagant military ceremonies that would follow his return to the motherland. Ceremonies at which he, GX3, would be showered in medals and commendations. He thought briefly of his two brothers, and the smile faded from his face. He wondered where they were and what they were doing. Probably back in Shangri-La, regretting their decision to throw in their lot with a few adventurous but misguided teenagers and a species that was a stone's throw away from total extinction. Fools. They had turned their backs on the regime that had nurtured them and, more importantly, was going to take over the world. In the not-too-distant future, the armies of North Korea would seize control of the population centers of the planet, including Shangri-La. They would surge into the Yeti's utopian city and kill everybody who resisted, human, Yeti, or GX. When that happened, it would be too late for his brothers to change sides. He looked down, saw Isabelle's ankle protruding, and gave it a sharp jab with one finger, causing it to withdraw under the blanket. Then he paused, listened for gunfire, and heard nothing. "I think it's time for us to board our plane, ladies," he said with a chuckle, reaching for the keys in the ignition. The truck rumbled to life. He turned on the headlights and eased the big vehicle away from the curb. The traffic on the roads had thinned, making for an easy journey along 3 blocks to the airport entrance. As he drove through the open gates, the headlights flashed across the flow of civilians staggering away from the airport. A crowd of desperate faces, their clothes splattered with blood, stumbling forward like zombies. Yep, a good sign. From the looks of things, the airport building would be almost empty when he got there. Perfect. The fewer bodies he had to drive over to get to the plane, the better. This mission would be finished in the next few minutes, and he would be on his way back home to a hero's welcome. His noisy truck thundered down the road, then turned into the car park, the headlights illuminating the building in the distance. Inside the airport, Hassan and Sierra had sneaked over to an area where, before this battle began, large windows once overlooked the tarmac. Now, those windows had been shattered, leaving countless shards of glass covering the floor like a carpet of knives. Carefully tiptoeing through the broken glass, the pair stopped behind a solid concrete wall. A fresh night breeze wafted through the large open gap once covered by thick glass. It was a welcome relief from the smell of blood and gun smoke in the building. They took up positions at the edge of the opening. Large jagged shards of glass, like the teeth on the top jaw of a predatory dinosaur, hung down from the top of the window frame over their heads. Hassan eyed them warily, then peeked around the wall's edge. On the tarmac, about 50 meters from the Yeti's concealed position, the North Korean plane stood waiting, surrounded by a dozen or more black-clad soldiers. Several men were in the process of detaching a fuel line from one wing, having completed the refueling process in readiness for takeoff. Hassan eased himself out of view, unslung the rocket-propelled grenade launcher from his shoulder, and examined it. It was a long, narrow tube with a pistol grip on the bottom and an optical sight mounted on one side. He had never seen this particular weapon before, but he was generally familiar with such things, and it didn't take him long to work out how to use it. The trigger guard, having been designed for use by humans, was a little small for his oversized hands, but he managed to squeeze his pinky finger in. Not ideal, but enough to get the job done. Sierra recalled the Shangri-La Council's order forbidding the Yeti rescue team from bringing projectile weapons. "If the council saw you with that right now, they wouldn't be happy," Sierra said to Hassan. Hassan rested the weapon on his shoulder, the barrel pointing down. "What the council doesn't know about won't hurt them," he grunted, but the same can't be said for the North Koreans. On the other side of the airport, Gull, the GXs and the teenagers were only meters from the shattered glass doors that led out to the car park and the safety of the city. As Mohawk extended one hand to push aside the battered door, the roar of an approaching truck stopped him in his tracks. The truck's bright headlights filled the foyer with light, illuminating the destruction around Mohawk and the others in yellow and revealing their positions to any North Korean soldiers in the area. The others suddenly froze, raising their arms to shield their eyes from the light. "What the hell is that?" cried Laheeti. "Whatever it is," exclaimed Gulbenkian without a hint of a stutter, "it's not stopping." Picking up the young prince, he sprinted away from the oncoming truck. The others followed hot on his heels, except for Maine, who stood there rooted to the spot, gripping his machine gun tightly, staring at the behemoth bearing down on him. Mohawk turned back and screamed. "What are you doing?" The truck thundered through the car park, slamming through two parked cars like a battering ram, closing on the airport terminal like a kamikaze plane locked onto an enemy ship's. Maine held his ground, squinting into the light, waiting to get a clear look at the driver. "Maine," howled Mohawk, "jump clear before it's too late," but the giant GX shook his head. Outside, the truck plowed through a low green hedge, mounted the gutter, and roared over the footpath that led to the airport's entry doors. In the brief moment when the truck's front tires bounced over the gutter, the blinding headlights flashed away, and Maine got a glimpse of the driver. Glittering black eyes, silver eyebrows, and the massive jutting jaw of a really angry silverback gorilla. "It's Flat Top," Maine howled. At that very moment, Hassan rested the rocket-propelled grenade launcher on his shoulder, pointed it at the plane's portside engine, and pulled the trigger. The grenade flashed through the air and struck the plane, detonating on impact. A thunderous explosion shook the ground, blasting searing air into the terminal. The wing, fully fueled, disappeared in a plume of orange flame and dense black smoke that quickly spread to the fuselage. The soldiers on the ground who survived the blast scrambled away to safety, where they watched in horrible fascination as the plane crumbled onto the tarmac like paper mache. Several soldiers who were inside the plane, including the commander, managed to escape before the entire fuselage was engulfed in fire. They hurriedly took cover on the far side of the burning wreck, dazed and wiping the black soot from their faces. The commander, feeling slightly shaken at his narrow escape, immediately began issuing orders. Safely concealed inside the terminal, Hassan could hear the crackle of the plane burning out on the tarmac. He quickly peeked around the edge of the wall to have a look at what was going on. It was the first time he'd seen anything that big on fire, except in Hollywood movies. "Looks like you gave them a warm welcome," said Sierra. "Sure did," Hassan replied. "Who says Yetis aren't hospitable hosts?" Sierra chuckled and said, "I've got a feeling this will be their first and only visit to Nepal." The commander led the remaining soldiers away from the flames to a smaller aircraft that was parked deserted on the tarmac. The pilots and passengers had evacuated the plane some time ago when the first shots were fired. With their guns up, the soldiers mounted the steps and proceeded inside, one at a time. The commander was the last to go in. Sierra watched what was happening. He mused, "That wasn't exactly what I had in mind." "Me neither," replied Hassan, throwing the empty launcher away, "and unfortunately I'm out of grenades. So we'll have to find another way to keep that plane on the ground." The truck smashed through the broken glass doors at the front of the airport in an ear-splitting crescendo and roared into the building, heading directly for the solitary figure standing in the foyer. The terrific explosion on the other side of the airport rocked the building to its foundations. Flat Top stared aghast at the mini-mushroom cloud of fire and smoke lighting the dark expanse of tarmac in the distance. Maine, recovering from the shock of the explosion, swung his machine gun round and pressed the trigger, firing from the hip. Blinded by the bright headlights, his wild aim traced a ragged line of holes across the truck's windscreen, filling it with a spider web of cracks. When the firing stopped, he pressed the trigger again. Click, click, out of bullets. The truck was only meters away and closing fast. Tossing the gun away, Maine charged forward and leapt high into the air, landing with one foot on the bumper bar and the other on the top of the truck's bonnet. The truck thundered forward, flattening seats, dead bodies, and discarded luggage as it plowed through the building. Holding on with a white-knuckle grip, Maine clambered up onto the bonnet and crawled forward to the shattered windscreen. Peering in, he saw two meaty hands gripping the top of the steering wheel but no driver. Suddenly, Flat Top's massive head appeared, uninjured, having ducked aside to avoid the hail of bullets that had riddled the windscreen with holes. The two GXs glared at each other, eyeball to eyeball. Maine's silver hair was lit up by the wall of orange flame in the distance. "What are you doing here?" growled Flat Top. "Giving you one last chance to make the right decision," snarled Maine. "To do what?" Flat Top roared. "To leave North Korea behind forever," Maine screamed. "I've made my decision and I'm not changing it," Flat Top retorted. "In that case," spat Maine, "I'm here to kill you." Mohawk and Zaw watched the truck rumble by with Maine clinging onto its bonnet. Without a moment's thought, they both sprinted after it, grabbed onto the side and hauled themselves up onto the flatbed. "Stay here," Mohawk yelled over his shoulder. Twig, Laheeti and Pemba watched the pair climb onto the truck. "Isabelle's probably in that truck," exclaimed Laheeti. The teenagers glanced at one another, each thinking exactly the same thing. Then they took off after Mohawk and Zaw, running as fast as they could in the darkness. "I knew they would do that," muttered Gulbenkian, hurrying after them. Flat Top swerved the truck one way then the other, trying without success to throw Maine off the precarious hold on the bonnet. When that failed, he raised one huge boot and kicked the windscreen out, shattering the glass in Maine's face. Maine threw up one arm to protect himself, then grabbed his brother's foot and gave it a vicious twist, trying to break the ankle through the heavy hiking boot. But Flat Top cranked the steering wheel to the left, swinging the truck to one side, causing Maine to lose his grip on the bonnet and start to slide off. He let go of Flat Top's leg and grabbed the frame of the side mirror, almost breaking it off. Flat Top used the opportunity to retract his leg, then reached out with one huge hand and grabbed Maine by the throat, fearlessly drawing him closer. "If you're here, Mohawk must be here too," Flat Top snarled. "Where is he?" Flat Top suddenly looked to his left and saw Mohawk's huge head fill the passenger side window. Looking in, Mohawk saw the blanket on the passenger side, with two squirming shapes underneath. Opening the door, he grabbed the blanket and tossed it away, revealing Abby and Isabelle's pleading eyes staring up at him, their mouths still stuffed with rag to keep them quiet. As the truck plowed towards Hassan and Sierra, the two yetis split up and ran for cover in opposite directions. Their unspoken intention was for the truck to pass between them, after which they would circle around and regroup. Right now there was altogether too much light on the ground floor, coming from the truck's headlights and the inferno on the tarmac, making them visible and vulnerable. In the truck, Mohawk thrust his machine gun through the open door. The end of the barrel was only inches from Flat Top's head. Mohawk hesitated for just a second, imagining what was about to happen. Filling Flat Top with lead in the confines of the truck would make an awful mess, but it had to be done. His finger pressed the trigger, but as the first bullet rocketed down the barrel of the machine gun, Flat Top let go of the steering wheel, grabbed the barrel and pushed it away, towards Maine. There was a brief, ear-shattering explosion of sound inside the truck as Mohawk emptied half the clip before taking his finger off the trigger. By the grace of God, whose divine light shone equally brightly on creatures of his beautiful design, as well as on the less attractive genetically engineered ones, the hail of bullets missed Maine by millimeters and blasted into the darkness, peppering the walls and floor with holes. At that instant, Sierra was 10 meters away and running for cover. The shots whizzed past him, and just as he was thanking his lucky stars, he was struck in the head. The bullet passed straight through and blew a hole out of the other side of his skull. His legs collapsed beneath him and he was dead by the time he hit the ground. The truck thundered by. On the other side, Hassan took cover and watched it pass, unaware that his friend had just been killed.
That is the end of this chapter. To listen to the next chapter on YouTube or to purchase the digital ebook from Amazon, see the links in the description.